This CyCast is provided to you by the Iowa State Letter Winners Club, bridging the gap between legend and legacy by engaging in our past to invest in our future.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest CyCast, and we have a wonderful guest today and one of the best wrestlers in Iowa State history, Mike VanArsdale. He was a three-time All-American, a national champion, and has also went on to a great career in international wrestling. And he's also a latest inductee of the Iowa State Athletics Hall of Fame. Welcome to our show, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, the first question I got to ask is, what was your reaction when Jamie Pollard told you that you're going to the Hall of Fame this next year?
That you guys fooled me. Well, you got me on the phone. But anyway, no, I was really happy about it. And I was happy I could hear it from someone that I had met before. You know, it just, it's not something you think about all the time. It's not something you're like dwelling on. You know, sometimes it may cross your mind if, if someone reminds you of it or something. But I was pretty excited about it. Haven't really, it hasn't sunk in yet, but it's just an opportunity for me to meet with my family and celebrate some hard work that we did back when I was Iowa State Cyclone on the mat. Still a Cyclone, but back then it was battle,
Yeah, absolutely, Mike.
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. You grew up in Waterloo, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that Waterloo has produced a ton of great wrestlers through the years. And you went to Waterloo West. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how much did it help you growing up in Waterloo when you had people that came before you like Dan Gable, you had Bob Siddons, and you had, the Buzzard Brothers, and all these great wrestlers that a lot of them went on to Iowa State as well. And actually, to be honest with you, and you don't know this yet, but Rich Bennick also is a Waterloo West grad. He's going into the class with you in this.
That's great.
Hall of Fame class. What was that like for you growing up in Waterloo and just learning the sport?
Well, you know what? My family was into athletics because we used to attend all the local high school events there in Waterloo. We lived next door to East Waterloo, actually. So not really, about half a mile away. So, we were always at those events. I was very well aware of what was going on with the high school athletics. And I was very much determined to be just like those kids that were playing there and, in high school. Now, as I got older and, my mother I think my mother knew the whole thing the whole time. She just kind of like guided me as I was getting older, talked to me about a few things, planted a few seeds in my head about the wrestling. And then once I got to the age where they allowed me to start, I tied into those people. I tied into what happened at East Waterloo, West Waterloo, the whole, the tradition there in town. And you get a slow start when you're almost 13, so I was wrestling kids that have been wrestling for years. And the first 2 years are rough. By my third year, I just felt like I could do it. And I'm the guy that walked the halls at Iowa State at night looking at pictures in Beyer Hall. I'm the guy that walked the halls at West High and didn't eat lunch and looked up at the state champions. I'm that guy. I'm the guy that had had 2 books. They had nothing but pictures of Olympians and their stories. I'm the guy in the summer that would sit there for 6 hours and read about those Olympic athletes, whether they were in wrestling or other sports. So that's who I was, and that's why I was able to rise up and, and compete with some of those guys that have been going for years.
Yeah. Well, Mike, when you were finishing up high school, the legendary Dr. Harold Nichols was still the head coach at Iowa State.
Mm-hmm.
What was that recruitment like with him? It was his final years, obviously, at Iowa State.
Yeah.
What was that like to meet him and have him try to, get you to Iowa State?
That was interesting because my brother and I would not miss Iowa Public Television, Iowa State. We watched those meets. One year we went down, Don Huff, who, he wrestled at Iowa. And, Don Huff was a successful wrestler there. But he was my high school coach, so we would sell things like hats and things to get down to an Iowa meet. Yeah. And I remember going to those meets down there and feeling that. But just knowing, going into the junior nationals my senior year, I didn't have any offers. But you can walk on here, you can walk on there. Yeah. And I was like, why is this? So I remember telling my mom, this is true. This is how it went down. I just told my mom, I was like, listen, I'm going to wrestle in one more tournament. and I'm going to win. It's the junior nationals, and it's going to be in the dome, and I'm going to win it at this weight class. And then that's probably going to be it. Because I was going to go to Iowa and walk on the football team. And I got the contact through Norm Granger, where it was something I was going to do. But then at the same time, my coach and Bob Siddons, we talked to Dan Gable, and he was like, okay, you can walk on the wrestling team. It was up in the air. But I just told my mom, I'm going to wrestle one more tournament and see what happens. And then so I went and I won that junior national tournament. The next day, Nichols was in my living room.
Okay.
Recruiting me. And he was pretty straightforward about everything. I was nervous, this Dr. Nichols in my room. What is he doing here?
Yeah.
And it was at 6 a.m. He just showed up at the house, knocked on the door, and he was like, how are you doing? And I was like, yep, that's right, Iowa State. I think I'll sit here. You sit over there. Where are your parents? It was just kind of he just came over, But that was, I don't know if that was a dream of mine, but it happened. And I remember that. And that was a big part of my life.
Yeah. When obviously Dr. Nichols retired, I think after your second year, is that right, Mike?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I was a little upset about it, but
yeah.
it worked out.
But the next coach was Jim Gibbons, but Jim was obviously an assistant for Dr. Nichols, right?
Yes.
What was that transition like between Dr. Nichols and Coach Gibbons?
Well, you know what? It was kind of a rough transition in my mind because I looked at Nick as my coach.
Yep.
So when Jim became my coach, it was kind of a rough transition because Jim was the guy that was doing you always got to have a bad guy. He's the guy at the sprints in the morning. We remember his voice. Go. When it's time to run another 400, you're like, what? And you're running with, with that in your mind. Like, this guy's just sitting back. He's chilling, wasn't thinking that he had won a national title or he did it before me. He's just dishing out the punishment to 19, 18, and 20-year-olds, So, but when he got the job, we all kind of accepted it. And then he hired Eddie Bennick. And I really liked that because he seemed like he's a person that was like that I could talk to as well. So the transition ended up being a magical one because we started beating everyone.
Yeah.
And I know Nick recruited them all in, but this is what was going on in practice. We started winning a lot. And that went on, for the whole time, the next 3 years. I just was on teams that won. I redshirted one of those years, but we just kept winning. And of course, we didn't win the nationals all 3 years, but we were in the running to actually win that. And it was so close. A few things go wrong here, and next thing you know, you're getting second or third or fourth or whatever we were getting. So, yeah.
Well, and Mike, I had the wonderful opportunity to watch the duel, and if you haven't seen it out there, you need to watch it. It's a great documentary, and this documentary focuses on the 1986 Iowa State-Iowa wrestling duel in Hilton.
I've seen it, yeah.
And I know you've seen it, Mike. And what I came away with it was the incredible bond that the wrestlers had, even though you were rivals. But the bond between the wrestlers in Iowa, at Iowa and at Iowa State, a lot of them were from Iowa, like yourself. Can you explain that? What was it like wrestling, against Iowa when basically both programs were number one and number two, right?
Yeah, I can explain that for sure because we all grew up together. We went to tournaments. We seen these kids at tournaments. I even wrestled guys like Dwayne Goldman at the, and Marty Kistler at the junior nationals. Even though they were a couple years older than me, I faced them when I was a sophomore, at the junior nationals. I watched Rico Chiapparelli wrestle when I was a little, he's not that much older than me, but we knew about these guys. We were either friends or you just knew who they were and you looked up to them. So it was just business as usual. You wrestle and these guys from Iowa or Pennsylvania. These are the toughest guys in the country. Sometimes Oklahoma and New Jersey or New York and California. Those were the schools, the areas I remember where the toughest guys were from. And we were always seeing them at these national tournaments that we would go to, and that sort of thing. So going to the meet and knowing who were on their team and who was on our team, it was just guys that we knew and we wanted to beat them. That's what our goal was, is to win every time we went against those guys. The problem was they weren't easy to beat.
Yeah,
it was pretty tough.
Yeah.
To beat those guys, and they probably felt the same way about us as well. But
sure.
just good rivalry. you know.
Yeah, and it still is. And, in 1985 and 86, you made All-American. And then you redshirted in the 86, 87 season, which ended up being a national championship season for Iowa State. What was the
Yes.
decision on you redshirting that year, Mike?
It was pretty simple. Um, so the first, that first year I placed in Oklahoma was 95, and I was just totally upset. Like I should have probably won that tournament is what was in my head. I know I love, lose matches during the season. I wasn't the kind of guy to try to go undefeated. I was trying to win the national tournament. So when I went down there, I was like, I'm going to surprise them all. I'm winning this. And I got sixth. So I was a little upset. So the next year I came back and really trained a lot harder. And, I had probably 8 or 9 losses that year. But, I was able to go up against some pretty good guys. And I thought I was going to win that tournament. And when I lost in the semis, I was like, okay, I have to get third. So I came back and got third. And I think this, I'm not trying to act like I'm like emotionally shattered because I actually was, to be honest with you. But I don't think I think I cried for 3 days. Like
Okay.
I couldn't get over it. Like somebody died in the family when I didn't win. And I told the coach on the van on the way home, Jim Gibbons, don't ask me to wrestle next year. It's going to take me a couple years to get over this. I need a year off. I'm going to win my senior year. It's going to be in Ames, Iowa. Don't ask me to wrestle next year. But he had already made his mind up that I was going to wrestle, Kevin was going to wrestle, Jackson, and then I was going to wrestle. But I wasn't planning on being at 67 ever again. So I knew I was going to get bigger, and I was going to go to 77 and wrestle there. What happened was my when that junior year started and Kevin was wrestling, I broke my arm really bad. I broke my navicular bone in my wrist, and it literally took 20 months to heal. So I didn't lift weights until the summer. I did start at 77 and then eventually went down to 67 once I got in shape.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I look back at that period where you were wrestling for Iowa State, Mike, and I mean, I just think about how amazing that wrestling room was. During your time, and I'm probably missing some names, but you competed with national champions inside that Bayer Hall wrestling room, like Kevin Darkus, Joe and Jim Gibbons, Eric Volker, Tim Krieger, Billy Kelly, Stuart Carter, Kevin Jackson. I mean, just tell me, what was that like to go to practice every day with that talent in that room?
Okay, so sometimes you hit the talent head on in practices. Sometimes you wrestle like your backups are a backup at a different weight class or one of your coaches. But I noticed on the days when I did hit the talent, those were the days where it was really tough. Like you could wrestle a 150 pounder who would be like a Tim Krieger or Larry Jackson and nearly almost get in a fight over it because you think you're supposed to destroy this lighter weight guy and he thinks he's supposed to beat you and you clash. And I just remember like I wrestled Tim once. He never asked me to wrestle again. I never asked him to wrestle again because that was the kind of practice that it's like and I'm not comparing it to this because a practice versus a competition, but it's like the Thrill in Manila. Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, guess what? They took everything out of each other. And I saw it like that. I said, if I wrestle guys like this every day, what's going to be left for the meet on Saturday? Or am I going to get hurt? So I would try to wrestle one of those guys a week and then wrestle other guys. It's almost like the NFL. You know what? They're going to have 2-a-days in the beginning of the year. But then when the season starts, they're not going to hit each other. They're going to take care of each other and just make sure the timing is correct. Make sure they're strong. Make sure they're running their sprints and they're not injured. And that's kind of how I was seeing it at that time. Like you wrestle a guy like Bill Tate, Eric Volker, and you start getting competitive and talking to each other, during practice while you're wrestling each other. So it's just a miserable experience. It made us tough, but at the same time, I try to only do that once a week. But like you said, it was tough. It was tough.
So going into your senior year, Mike, you wrestled the majority of the year at 177, and then going into postseason, you decided to go back down. Or how did that decision work to go back down to 167 for the postseason?
That's a good question, and I'm just walking out to the other side of the house because I've got someone coming over here. But anyway, what happened was this. The truth is I made my decision before we wrestled Iowa in our last dual meet. So it was a must. I had to beat Royce Algiers in my head. I said, I'm going to beat him now. I'm going to act like I'm at nationals. I'm going to beat this guy. Well, it didn't turn out that way. Um, and, you know, I, it's hard for me to talk about that. You know, I knew I could throw him on his back, and I got to a position where I did, and it was off the mat, and it was off the mat, you know, and I argued with the referee after the stalling call, and I lost my focus, and he took me down and won.
Yep.
You know, so I lost that match. That hurt me really bad because I wanted to, this is a guy you want to beat, you know, Royce Algiers. It felt good to beat Roy, and I beat Royce Algiers in matches, but I wanted to beat him then and then make the announcement. Okay, I beat him. He's winning the nationals, and I'm going to go down and win at 167 because I really felt a little off at 77 at that point. I felt like I needed a little bit more firepower, strength, a little bit more power, endurance. And I didn't feel as husky as I did at the Las Vegas tournament. I felt a little worn out. So since I was worn out and I knew I could beat David Lee, you know, and who was the #1 guy at 167, and that's the only guy I'm training for. The rest of them kind of fall into the, you know, if you can beat the best guy, you can beat them all. I don't care what anybody says. I train to beat the #1 guy. So I figured, oh, if I can beat him, I can beat the rest of them too. Not that I would disrespect any of them, but that's why I went down, because I just felt like the training was a little bit off, and I want to win this baby. So I'm going to beat Algiers in this last dual meet, and then I'm out of there. I'm going to go down to 67 when these guys won't have a clue at wrestling. You know, I was 6'2", you know, and hard to get away from. And I knew the 67 pounders, it would be easy for me to handle. And was I wrong? They were tough to handle. Once I cut that weight, I was like questioning myself because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't, my muscles shut down. And I had to win with this. This is how I won nationals, with my head. I didn't win with my body. My body was gone.
Well,
but the decision was made. It turned out okay.
It did turn out.
Okay.
It
Turned out
okay, Mike,
Yeah, it
because
did.
the 1988 national championships were held in Hilton Coliseum your senior year, and you made
Hmm.
a promise that you would win it that year, and you did.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
what was that like for you? For example, I don't know if you even know this, but there's only 3 Iowa State wrestlers who ever won a national title in Hilton Coliseum,
You
and you're
just
one of them.
educated me.
Yep, it's Kelly Ward, Nate Carr, and Mike VanArsdale.
Never
And
knew that.
yeah, and to win it, your last match in Hilton with your family, that had to have been one of the most highlights of your career, right?
Most definitely. And you know, there's things you think about every day in your life. You know, I think about some part of my Iowa State wrestling without. I was driving down the street. I'll think of something. You know, sitting down to eat a meal, going to bed. I mean, I try not to, but I think about that tournament and winning that tournament. I don't try to sensationalize it or act like it was grander than it was. It was a tough thing to do, and I did it. And I think that's why I think about it, because it was so challenging, especially after I lost the weight. But you know, and it really just comes down to 5 years in that wrestling room, and
Yep.
you know, and just trying to get something out of it and feeling like you accomplished something. When I won the tournament, it was a relief, because I was really burned out on wrestling at the time, just because we went so hard and that weight cut got me. So, I mean, you know, I don't want to talk about too much, but you know, it just, I felt like a relief. Like, did I win that? They're like, you won. They're like, I did. I won that. And they're like, yeah. I was like, all right, I won. You
Yeah.
know, they probably never heard the end of it for a couple of weeks there, 'cause I was definitely celebrating. But
Yeah.
you know, we earn all that. You know, it
Sure.
wasn't anything given to me. You know.
Yeah. Well, you get done with your career, and you did wrestle internationally for a long time, and
Yeah,
we were 2-time Olympic alternate, 6-time U.S. national freestyle team member,
that
and
hurts. But yeah, okay.
but the thing is, Mike, I can't imagine the jump that you have to take from a college wrestler to an international wrestler. It had to be huge, right?
That you're asking great questions, because these questions are, you know, I really haven't answered them too much, but I can tell you, the jump, that was a tremendous jump. It was very difficult jump. You know, I jumped on my, this is what Eddie believed in me, and Eddie believed I could do well in freestyle. Eddie knew that. He took me without any practices after my sophomore year, after
Yeah.
I placed sixth at 167. I ran across campus to tell my coaches I got an A on my test because I was excited about this class I was making a comeback in. Eddie
Yeah.
was there. Joe Gibbons pulled out of this tournament we were all going to. And hold on one second, guys. Sorry about the interruption. I got to get my son out here to accept this delivery. But Joe Gibbons pulled out of this tournament, and it was the National Open. And Eddie's, tickets are transferable. So I took Eddie's, Joe Gibbons' ticket and went to the National Open. Stevie, go out in front and accept the stuff. So I went to the National Open, and Eddie seen me win the first 6 matches and then lose 10-9 to 2 guys that placed 3rd and 4th behind Mark Schultz and Melvin Douglas. And he was like, wow, with no practice, you were able to do that. After the Nationals, you should go up to 180 and wrestle, is what he told me. So, you know, sorry about that little thing. I have a delivery coming to my house.
That's fine.
Was pulling up there. But it was a tough jump. So I was able, I had it in my head, and I jumped on my roommate's scooter. He was Mark Urquhart. He played basketball at Iowa State.
Absolutely.
I jumped on his scooter to go to a workout. After the workout, I got hit by a car, and I really messed my hands and my wrist and my shoulder up. I couldn't even do a push-up 3 years later. But what happened was I was at Northern Iowa at Rediker, and I kept reading about Royce Algiers and Kevin Jackson. And I says, I think I can beat those 2 guys. And that's what was in my head. So I started lifting over there. It was when Rich Powers was wrestling. I remember seeing him.
I remember him, yeah.
I started lifting. And then I went to the National Open, and that's what got me back into it. And the thing that helped Bobby Douglas helped me a lot, not that he coached me, but his athletes, when he asked me to be his assistant coach here as a volunteer assistant in 91, I moved down to Arizona State, and I learned from those wrestlers, and they had a different technique. And guess who told me about this? Dr. Harold Nichols told me that Bobby had the technique, and if I ever had a chance to train with him or his team do it.
Well,
and that's how I got up the level.
He was the best. Yeah. Well, and you had a great career, and you won the '97 World Cup title. But there's one match I want to ask you about at the 2000 Olympic trials. I'm guessing you were 35 years old. You beat Cale Sanderson.
34.
34 years old.
Yeah.
You beat Cale Sanderson. Now, a lot of people don't know this. And, I know Cale was just finishing his sophomore year at Iowa State, but he's still Cale Sanderson. What do you remember from that match?
Well, I got the wrong info because I think my coach told me that I was done until the next day. So I had my backpack, and I was walking out of the building, and they started calling my weight class up. And I said, are you sure I'm done? Because they're calling my weight class. He says, you're done. So I said, I don't know. I put my bag down and I sat down, and I wasn't feeling very good. And a lot of people don't know this. I should have never wrestled Cale Sanderson. I should have never been at that weight class. The day before, at midnight, I was sitting there contemplating, because my coach had told me, don't go down to 187 because you won't win, because you're too big. I was 218 pounds. And but I was in the Army, and they had Dominic Black and Rex Holman at 214 and a half. So they had asked me to go 187 to spread our guys out, because only one could win. And they told me, this is a true story. I was told by the colonel, you could either go 214, but you better win, or I'm going to send you to Korea, is what she told me. And I said, okay. And she says, or you can go down to 187, and I understand you can win that too. I said, but I don't know if I can make that and win. She says, well, you make a decision. Well, my dad was sick, and we knew that. So I was like, I'm not going to Korea. I'm going to just cut the weight, and then I guess it's all over. Because at that point, I was getting older. I wasn't motivated. My family was more important to me than wrestling. I was thinking about my dad being sick. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go down here, and if I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. And that was a very bad attitude to have. So I wrestled Kading, and we were in overtime, and I was like, I know what I'll do. And this is going to sound bad, but I was just like, I've never shot a low single, but I know the technique, but I'm just going to shoot it and see what happens. Because I didn't feel like anything was working for me, because I was dying from cutting down 87 from 11 p.m. to 11 p.m. to 3 p.m. That was my weight cut. So anyway, I I basically shot the little single and finished it on them and won in overtime. That's when we were going to leave the building. That's when I heard my weight class being called up. My family was already gone. They didn't see that match. And I just dropped everything and went out there, and I was walking out. I seen a few Cyclones. I want to say it was Joe Gibbons, Randy Yu, and I can't remember who it was, but I went to wave at them like, "Oh, hi guys," and they weren't laughing. They're basically like, "You have to win. You have to beat this guy. You can't let a Cyclone from that generation beat a Cyclone from ours." And I was like, "Well, you come down here and wrestle him." That's what I was thinking. But then when I got to my corner, Kevin Jackson was in my corner. A little tear was coming down his eye. And he looked at me. He's like, "I know what you're thinking, but you got to win. You got to win." And I was like, "Oh, shoot. I got to win." I said, okay. I'll win this match. So I went out there and I'm wrestling. Kid took me down. Well, I was like, "Oh, shoot. I didn't see that. You took me down again. Wow, you got in on this. What the heck's going on here?" So then I was in a parterre position and I saw his head. And I could throw headlocks from our feet or on the mat or on the ground. Yeah. And I seen his head, so I threw a headlock and he went to his back, and I was surprised. So we're just taking it off the truck. Yeah, I was surprised that he went to his back. Once he went to his back, everything clicked in my head. I said, "Let me see if my single works on this guy," and it did, and it worked again. And then the second time, Kevin held his thumb up like this, meaning go ahead and do it. And I was like, "I don't want to." He says, "You're going to have to. You're going to have to score some points to beat this guy. You need to lift him right now." So I was like, "Okay, fine." And that was like the same way I won the SA tournament. My body was out of it. But you just think about the technique and make yourself do it. You can operate at the highest level. So I was able to lift him for 5. Then the match was all essence over.
Yeah.
Because he was not going to be able to come back.
Sure.
So,
well, Mike, that's a fabulous story. Thank you.
That's how that happened. And, he's a young guy, great wrestler, probably would have had a chance to win the Olympics then if he'd have got past me.
Yeah.
I believe that. I just think he's just a great wrestler,
Well,
I lost the next day to Full Heart, so that didn't turn out so good.
Yeah.
So,
well, obviously, Cale went on to win the gold medal in 2004 Olympics and is, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. I got one last question to ask you.
Go ahead, Mike.
As I let you go. I mean, just to sum it up, how excited are you to be inducted into the Iowa State Athletics Hall of Fame?
Well, guess what? I am totally excited about that. I mean, that's just something that you don't think about. Well, it's going to hit me soon. Yeah. It's going to really hit me. And it hasn't hit me yet, but I know it will. And I'm really looking forward to going there and seeing everyone and bringing my family there, because that's something that we haven't done a lot of since they were little kids. I haven't taken them to Ames for a while. So this is something that's dear to my heart, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, thanks again, Mike, for everything. I really
All right.
Appreciate it.